All right, before we get started, let's pray. Let's bring God into this. Lord, you are always welcome in our conversations. We don't want there to be anywhere where you're not part of our discussions, our thoughts, our actions. We ask you, Lord, to be present. Today is a day where we're going to try to glorify you in our conversation, and we ask that you be with each speaker and even the conversation that comes with it from the audience. And we just ask all of this in your name. Amen. Amen. So my name's Chris Aaron. I've been here, I guess, at MDPC for a good long time, 20 plus years. And one of the things that's always struck me is that we have a lot of the same conversations that I've had, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, into now. Then some of them are very similar. And maybe it's because just us as men, we're very comfortable in discussions around sports. It's part of who we are. Not everybody, I don't want to generalize it, but for the most part, we're always having conversations around it. Did you hear about what happened at fill in the blank? Or you'll never guess what happened here. And we look back and have some of these aha moments, but the question really is, how do we show up as Christian men in a way that we can lead youth and youth sports maybe in a direction that it needs to go, versus abdicating maybe our responsibility or assuming that it's too big of an issue? What can I do about it? And so today's conversation is, let's listen and talk about what's worked. Let's talk about what matters. What doesn't work, what hasn't worked. Because we've got a great panel. I'll let them introduce themselves here in just a minute, kind of their background, their history, and then I'll have a few questions to kind of get us started, and then feel free to ask any questions, and we'll get a mic out to you, so that way this will all be part of an artifact that we can send to other people as well to be part of the conversation. Sound good? Okay. All right, so I start off with this, which is, I do believe we are at a crossroads with sports. Now, maybe that's a cliche. Maybe that's easy, just to sound the alarms. But I think we would all agree we've seen with our own eyes that burnout for youth sports is maybe out of control. I think we might even be able to say that specialization is happening way too early, earlier than it's ever, right? And then maybe lastly, the lessons that are being learned that you hope team sports often provide, maybe are teaching maybe the wrong lessons or maybe not the right lessons. So I'd start with that, not because we want to start off with, talking about, how broken everything is, but to recognize it and call it out for what it is. So, well, before we go into some of the questions I've got for each one of you and as a whole, why don't we do some quick introductions? Brandon, we'll start with you and kind of your background and maybe your love for, where your love for coaching started.
Yes, I'm Brandon Stribling, and I am from Family Point Resources. I'm the director of athletics there, so we cover all sports. And the ones that we don't have under our organizations, we reach out to other organizations that are local in the neighborhood to reach those kids that want to be a part of that. My background is I've been in this neighborhood for 10 years now, servicing this community through Family Point Resources. Within that, I've made several connections with the schools, which we support academically as well as spiritually through mentorship and counseling as well. We also work with kids from the pre-K age all the way up through high school with our college prep class, which I came from today, which we help kids get college and career readiness, not just college, because there is another path as well. We work on career readiness as well, and also we help with athletic recruitment of all sports.
My name is... Check. Yes. Are we on? My name is Drew Tingleaf. I coached a couple of Family Point squads back in the day. And I've got 3 kids. One was a volleyball player. One was ended up being a lacrosse player. I coach, volunteer coach now, still lacrosse. Right now we're doing 6U lacrosse, and I am materially the worst athlete right here on this stage.
You're better than Gilbert in pickleball, I'll tell you that much. But my name's Kevin Witt. I'm with Spring Spirit. I'm the athletic director. I am originally from Jacksonville, Florida. I relocated here. I was blessed enough to play professional baseball for 15 years. It's kind of ironic that we're doing this because I always tell people, you know, I was fortunate enough to make it to the big leagues. I played in Japan, I played in Venezuela, I played in Puerto Rico. But I say the craziest stuff that happens on a baseball field is 9U and below, like hands down. So it's just, I'm excited about this conversation and where it can go. And my wife and I have 5 kids, 22, 20, 18, 17, and about to be 12. My wife was an athlete. All our kids are athletes, and so been coaching SPMSA against by, you know, for a long time. Coach with them and against them. So I'm excited about being here. Thank you for having me.
I'm Mike Gilbert. Is this working? Sorry. I'm his counterpart. I'm the runt. We coach together. I'm also with Spring Spirit. I'm sit on their board. I'm the board chair for baseball, and I coach their high school program. I've got 3 boys and a wife I don't deserve. One at A&M, and a junior, and an 8th grader. And was a baseball player up into college, and my passion is coaching, building young men through the cross on a baseball field.
That's great. So first question is open mic for any of you 4, but what was sports like for each one of you growing up? And we'll more focus on what your experience was before we kind of compare that and contrast it to where we are today. But what did it look like for the 4 of you?
Well, I guess I'll start. I actually grew up in a tennis family, so yeah, there you go. So, I mean, we played basketball, we played baseball. My dad coached us, so we were very fortunate that my dad was very involved with that. Tennis, he had to pass us on to somebody else, but we were always together. We were a very competitive family, still to this day. In our family, we're very competitive no matter what we do, in a fun way. But I think it was because my dad got involved at such an early age and just wanted the best for us, right? And he figured that if my kids are going to do sports, that you know, I wanted to provide the best opportunities for him, and if he couldn't do that, then he was going to find out how he was going to be able to provide that for us. But I was always blessed. Even when I got to high school, I went to a high school in Jacksonville, Florida, Bishop Kenny High School, and to this day, some of my biggest lessons were from the coaching staff that I still keep in touch with, and I think that's extremely important, is to, you know, surround yourself with, you know, the right people. You know, have a strong village behind you, and whether that comes to family or coaching, because you're only as good as the people you surround yourselves with. So I think I was very blessed at a young age to, you know, my dad and my mom and dad surrounded us around the right people, family, friends, teammates, all that type of stuff, and so provided that positive, you know, fun learning environment for us.
Sure, I'll go next. I grew up with very supportive parents, and in a very different way than today of playing sports. It was more barefoot and broomsticks and racquetballs, but all day, every day. I mean, that's how, you know, there wasn't any private lessons where I grew up or anything like that. We just played. And when I got to high school, and a lot of what drives me is there were some times when I was in high school where I was, for lack of a better term, in a dark place, lost, whatever that sounds like. And it was a baseball coach who we buried 3 weeks ago, that was a game changer for me. And Chip Nyla is his name, and that relationship, he's the man that taught me how to play, not only technically, but the other piece of that was the 80%, and that was what was from with my heart. He always used to say, I can get you ready to get in the box, but in order to go from being an average hitter to a great hitter, that's just whether or not you can hit with your heart. And so that was the beginning of my journey of figuring out what it meant to play ball in a different way. And that's the way that, as we get into that at Spring Spirit, and the way that we mentor and build our players from a whole child perspective.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, we'll definitely want to touch on that, kind of pull on that string a little bit. Brandon, what about you?
Myself with sports, growing up, it was mostly our organized sports was done all in school. So you're talking about elementary, I was fortunate to have very good PE teachers. So for our neighborhood, that's what we would get. That was our organized sports. And if we did have an opportunity to play outside of it, it was a neighborhood team where you would only play other surrounding subdivisions per se. And that's how it was led by other dads, same way like he grew up the same way. Those dads come out, they'll take over a team. Everything is pretty much in walking distance because that was like the only way it was going to work. So that's how we did sports going through that. And as we got older with middle school and high school, and it becomes more a community deal where everyone was joining in and chip in to make sure everyone got to those practices in high school. Then you have after school buses. You don't see it as much now, especially on this side where people take advantage of that, but that was huge for the community I grew up in, was having that athletic bus to take us everywhere, because without it, we just would not be able to participate. And pretty much that was life for us. And for my culture and where I came from, it was sports. You were going to get involved in sports, and that was your way to be successful, and it's your tool to get academic opportunities on a higher level.
That's great. That's good feedback. Drew, do you want to weigh in at all in terms of kind of what you...
No, I'm good.
Okay, so I just give you opportunity. So that hopefully sets the stage for maybe what shapes us. And that's kind of the purpose of even having the discussion. We can all think about what shaped us when we were younger, and it's those opportunities, or it's the environment. Like you were saying, Kevin, it's like this was the culture in which that we were looking, the lens we were looking through, and what came alongside us, and whether it be opportunities in terms of what was available to us, or what mattered. That helps, I hope, kind of with our next line of questions, which is knowing this is how you respond and this is what shaped you. How do you think youth sports shapes kids today? If it's different maybe from the way you experienced it.
I mean, I'll start. I jokingly, I didn't grow up. My parents really, my mom's Japanese, my dad's American, and they didn't really push athletics much. I didn't really get into. I really didn't start understanding what being an athlete was till I was actually coached in tennis by Don Coleman. He was my tennis teacher. That's when I started to get a taste for athletics. But I didn't really. What I do remember of it playing baseball in Little League is my parents would come and they would kick me out of the car and drive away, and we'd have practice. Right? I mean, your parents would come drop you off, and you'd have practice, and you'd be done. And then at games, they would show up to games, and they'd clap, and every now and then I'd hear my dad say, hey, hey, way to go, or something like, and that was pretty much it. And then I showed up, 25 years later at Pine Shadows, and it was complete bedlam. Parents staying all practice, and look, I was the worst offender. Stick over there knows. I was crazy like you read about, right? And so I think all that to say is I think parental involvement has changed dramatically in the last 25 years. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I think that, I got involved at a young age, when my kids were at a young age because, I wanted to for one, but I figured, okay, if they want to do this, I'm gonna get involved and help and, coaching basketball or whatever it is. But I think today it seems to be everything's kind of watered down. And I think sometimes, just like everywhere you look, there's a new team, a new organization. And I think that, if there are some parents that are in it for the wrong reasons, like Brandon said, like when I played baseball, you played Little League, and then I don't even know if we had fall ball because we played basketball. And then in the summer, it was American Legion, and you didn't have a choice. It was 5 high schools that had to play at this one for the one post. But I think in today's sports spectrum, I just think that there's so many parents that want to do it for the wrong reasons, and it kind of waters down the good coaching, and then it affects other dads or even mentors or volunteers wanting to get involved because they don't want to be associated. It's just nowadays it's so hard to find that right fit and that right situation to be able to go out and be the coach that you really want to be.
Yeah, to piggyback on what he was saying, I agree with what all you guys were saying. There's also, in my opinion, an abundance of resources now when it comes to athletics on one side, and then the other side is where there's none. So there's like this big gap in the middle, and there's also a lack of information for these parents. When you talk about parents getting really involved, they're really involved with not enough information. So they're assuming what they've seen on, Instagram or TikTok. It's like, oh, this is how you get recruited, because I deal with that a lot. This is how you get recruited. This is how you should go through as a kid. You should start batting practice when they're 8 years old, and they're doing it for 3 or 4 days a week. They're just getting all this false information, so a lot of stuff is being missed when you discuss burnout and stuff, but I know we'll talk about that probably later, but I just want to say that it's just, an abundance of information that's put out there, and it's not all very good information. Yeah.
One piece of that, too, is I remember as an athlete, I always had, as a little boy, a dream of playing Major League Baseball. That was always... So it wasn't like we didn't have aspirations. All little boys, little girls have that. But the conversation around at 10 or 11 or 12 years old of playing D1 baseball or D2 baseball or this coach or doing all that, and some of us up here ended up being those and playing at that level. But even in high school, I think one of the things that breaks my heart a lot of times is when I'm out there and I see a really talented ball player. And all they're talking about, they're not worried about the fact that he's played his whole life, and he started off at 6 years old with 700 kids playing ball with him, and he's made it down to a 6A high school, or up to a 6A high school, and there's only 3 or 4 of them left, which is a major accomplishment. That young man or that young woman on the softball field, I'm just saying baseball or softball because that's what I coach, but it's a massive accomplishment. Most of those kids that are even a first or second string starter on any one of these high school teams around here is a D2, D3 potential athlete. And they don't even, it's not even, but the part of it that breaks my heart even more is when they're out there and you look at the glassiness in their eyes and the passion gone because they're not able to even be where they are right then. Because everybody's already worried about what's coming next. Instead of just playing ball today, just loving the game, being there with the part of their team, all that piece of it. That's the difference that I see that makes me sad for a lot of kids, young men, young women today, is that being taken from them.
The joy.
It's like they're standing there and we're talking about other stuff and they're right there. Like
Right.
they're just going, are you even here to, you're so worried about, when I was in high school, yeah, I had 27 scouts behind our dugout because Vince Moore, the Atlanta Braves, were coming to draft him. That was cool and fun and all that. I still wasn't thinking about where I was going to play. You know what I was thinking about? How we were going to beat the next team that week. And everybody was fired up about that and excited and all that. I see these kids. I had a conversation with a kid that I'm super close with about this season. You know what he talks about? Where he's going.
Yeah.
I'm like, you can get hurt, son,
Yeah.
in the next 6 weeks. Trust me, they'll forget your name. Quickly.
Yeah.
All it takes is his leg to get torn in half.
Yeah.
They don't remember your name. Love it right now.
That's great advice, right? To remind ourselves of what you have. Now, obviously, there's different levels, and stages for all youth sports, right? So some of who you're referring to is a little bit older, right, to the high school, but even at the younger age, kind of missing the point, right? What I remember about my son, he could never play enough when he was really young. There's a point in time, though, that eventually you reach this point of diminishing returns, and you start to realize that you're starting to take away some of that youth, some of the fun out of it, because now it's becoming a job. So all of a sudden now we decide, well, maybe he's got enough talent, maybe he can play at the time, some club baseball, and now he's playing club baseball and SBMSA, and so now we're running from one game to get to SBMSA in time to be able to make it. And that was good for about a year. And then it was, now it's like, I'm going to miss that birthday party now. Now it's going to be, I'm missing this. And so we started to see that. So I think taking the joy out of it, it happens at different ages for just that it's age appropriate. It's taking it maybe away when it's younger, which is, how do you have fun and enjoy it to maybe prevent some of that burnout? But then as they get older, can they still remind themselves of why they play and the joy of it? So they're not always looking at the business side of it, the outcome out of it. So that's good. So thanks for that. So what I'd like to be able to ask a question to, and I'm going to ask it probably on behalf of others as well, is, okay, so you guys have had a lot of experience coaching. You've seen a lot of players. You've seen a lot of parents. What would you tell a parent today of how they should come alongside and approach at the youth level, the younger age, and then maybe how that evolves over time? Because I think that'd be important to kind of provide your counsel and your experience so others can learn from it.
I'll start. It's a great question. I wish I had done a lot of things differently. I was just this weekend up in Austin playing an away game up there, and we had a game cancel, and so we circled all the parents up, and we had all the boys there and all their parents. And I told them I spent 4 or 5 years traveling all over the country with my son playing lacrosse, him playing lacrosse, and me dragging him everywhere. And I almost don't remember anything about lacrosse. I literally almost remember nothing. What I remember about all that time is eating breakfast at IHOP. I remember taking the boys surfing when we had a tournament in Oceanside. I remember lots and lots of dinners. I remember lots of times around the table with parents, and lots of windshield time with my son. That's what I remember. But unfortunately, in most of that time, I was focused on the wrong thing. I was focused on how's my son going to play in front of the guy from Duke, right? That's where my head was, when my head should have been in, what am I going to talk with my son about at dinner or on the 3-hour trip we're in the car? And so if I had one thing to say to a parent now, I'd say focus on the drive to practice and focus on dinner time. And if you end up traveling with your son or daughter, focus on the windshield time. And that would be my thing.
That's a really good point because it brings up something pretty funny about that. You know, it's you hear all the, you know, we're all guilty of it. And I grew as a coach tremendously. You know, maybe that's why I have 5 kids so I can improve with each one. But my dad used to always call me when I was, you know, I was playing in the big leagues, and he'd say, "Hey, you know, why don't you swing at that first pitch? You always take it." And I'm like, "Well, Dad, first of all, it might look down the middle on TV, but it's like 97 with nasty sink on the corner. Like, so, you know, it's you know, it's after the game, right? Like, can you, you know, you got anything else to say? Like, you know, but, you know, it's funny the memories that, you know, the good and the bad. You know, there's been, you know, good situations after games, and bad situations after games. You could have handled stuff differently. You know, you wait, you know, the old 24-hour rule, wait 24 hours before you address it, whether it's with your wife or your kid or David By's wife, who you know, she was tough to control when she was when his kids were. But
Go Berks.
But you know, I think that we're all guilty of my growth as a coach is just, it's been massive, and especially since the past 3 years that I've been at Spring Spirit, because it's a whole different animal, right? Anybody can coach the kids that are good. It's what do you do with the kids that aren't good? And that's why I always like coaching SBMSA, is because you have the draft, basketball draft, and you get what you get to pick your kids, but you get what you get. What are you going to do with them? But I really like that. But with Spring Spirit, you know, you guys might not be familiar with Spring Spirit, but we're most of our kids are needs-based kids, and man, I had to take a step back and completely change my coaching philosophy and you know, get on your hands and knees and really teach these kids how to do stuff. And we've grown tremendously, but it's helped me as a coach, and just, you know, you learn. You got to learn from doing the right things and the wrong things. But yeah, I think your point is you know, just focus on the positive things, and don't always make it about, you know, that sport or that game or whatever. There's always an appropriate time to address that, and so it's over time. You know, I think that I've grown tremendously in how to handle those situations as a coach and as a parent.
On this subject, what I would like to share with the parents would be, honestly, just be realistic about what a child can handle. Elementary level for sure, that's 12 and under. 40 hours a week they're in school. You're gonna put them in practice 3 days a week. It's 2 hours each, right? It's 46 hours. The game on the weekend, let's just say 4 hours. Drive time, actually playing the game, afterwards, whatever. That's over a 50-hour week on a 12-year-old or younger child. That's not being realistic, that this kid should go out and perform and be thinking about all they have to do. I got to do homework. Mom wants me to do chores. I got to get all this done. Then I got to go to practice. I got to perform for coach. I want to be there. I want to do big, you know, shine in this game. That's a whole lot. 50 hours a week. Some parents don't even work that, and they're putting it on the kid. Then you turn around and say, okay, I'm going to sign my kid up for baseball and swimming. So now I'm going to leave the baseball diamond. Coach has been telling me, okay, I got to put my glove here, I got to stand this way, I got to square off the ball to get into the swimming pool. This coach is going to tell me to do something else, okay? My freestyle has to be this way, I got to keep my hands this way. You're asking a child to turn it on and off. We don't do that. We don't go from being a fireman to a doctor all in the same day. It can't happen. So I would just tell the parents, hey, let's be more realistic about what we put on these kids, especially 12 and under. That's just way overboard. That's what I see when you talk about the parents getting in there a little too involved, just not being on. You're tired. I see parents are exhausted. Yeah, you worked. Now you're putting in extra hours because you're going to sit in the parking lot. You're going to question the coach and think all these questions. You can ask him why your kid isn't doing this. Oh, he's not running fast enough. Maybe because he just came from swim practice. Yada, yada, yada. But that's just want to put that out there. Let's be realistic about the hours we put on these kids.
That's great. Yeah. So let's move into philosophy, right? So how would you describe, Brandon, maybe kind of your philosophy, whether it be Family Point's philosophy, your philosophy in terms of what it is to be in youth sport, like in terms of how you coach youth sports, or kind of what the purpose of it, kind of your style and what you're trying to accomplish?
Me personally, I'm trying to grow the kid holistically, all around, okay? I want to know about your grades. I want to know why you walked up to practice today and you're already bawling, or I can tell you've been crying since you've been in the car before you got here. That's what I'm looking at. I want to get you, when I start to coach, I'm going to coach to your abilities and understand that kid's limitations. I think that gets missed a lot. Every kid has limitations, okay? You have to coach to their abilities. That's what I want to do, to help them feel like they're successful. Because everyone is not going to hit 10 home runs. Everyone is not going to be the best three-point shooter. We have to coach to their abilities so they be successful in that sport. And that's what I try to do in all the different sports that I've coached, is just say, hey, I want you to feel successful, like I understand this game, and I'm going to play it safely and successfully based on my skills, not anyone else. It's just you every day. So that's my philosophy towards coaching sports.
That's great. What about Spring Spirit?
Man, we got a lot in common. But at Spring Spirit, we have the whole child approach. And, we have the mind, body, and soul. And obviously the body is the athletic pillar. We have an education department. We have a ministry department. We have mentoring. We do all that. And so even when I was coaching pro ball, I was a hitting coach for 3 years in the Miami Marlins system. And the database that was built, basically anybody that's ever had any interaction with a player, it's in there, right? So they all have their player profiles. It gives you a background because, especially at the pro level, it's about earning trust, right? I'm not just going to go start spitting stuff at you and, this guy's going to be like, man, this guy, he's just coming at me all, so it was just, you sit back and eventually they're gonna start asking you questions and you got to earn their trust. And so it kind of helps from that perspective. It helped to kind of understand the background of where some of these kids come from. I say kids, some of them were still kids. But that also helped me when I got to Spring Spirit, because we have the whole child piece to where, we sit down, COVID kind of messed some things up. That's kind of when I first started at Spring Spirit. It'll be 3 years on March 1st for me. But we literally sit down and we go by roster and we go by each kid. And we name a kid. I kind of say from a baseball standpoint, kind of where he's at level-wise, because we do have some kind of, there's times where you got to transition kids out into something else. Baseball might not be for them. Do they want to play an instrument? What is it? They want to be a doctor. Whatever that is, we want to provide those resources for them. But you start to learn things about those kids. He's never had a father figure in his life, and so it doesn't change my, I'm not gonna handle them with kid gloves. It's just I might take a different approach on how to reach that kid. And so it really helped me, I know, become more creative, and especially with my coaching staff, because when you know the backgrounds of these kids and the stuff, like you said, like I can tell, sometimes you just see the kid when he shows up and you're like, okay, this is gonna be one of those days for him. And so you just got to learn how to handle those types of situations, and it's tough. But I think it helps you to learn. The more you know about the kids, and sometimes we're coaching seasonal and we don't have a whole lot of time with those kids. We might know the families and some background, but I think for me it really helps to kind of know the kids, know the families, know the situation to help you kind of take a better approach on how to coach them.
Good. You want to add anything?
Our acronym that we live by with our boys, and Kevin and I a couple of years ago, when we had got our boys to a place technically where they were getting a lot more successful, hitting, and building the Northbrook baseball program, and some players from Stratford, and we got some players from all over on the north side. But my point of that once we got to that, it was, well, what's the other piece, right? I mean, we've got the coaches, we can teach hitting all day long. We're a Christian organization. What are we missing? And when our program transitioned, and when we just went from the slow grind over the last decade to just, Northbrook baseball beat Stratford last year for the first time in 34 years.
First winning season in 2 decades.
2 decades. And it was because the boys started believing that they were there and everything that they were going through was for their God, for their family, and for their team. That's it. Everything we do. And I'm going to read you something at the end of this that I sent to them, a text that'll go into that just about this week as the season's getting going, and asking them, are you praying before the game? Our process that we had in the summer, are you doing it now just because Kevin and I are not there? No. Well, all right. That's our secret sauce, boys. That's how we got to where we are. And them realizing, and that was the gift that I was given by Chip Nyla that I talked about, where he took a broken kid, me, gave him another shot, and taught me how to hit with my heart. And that was the pathway, was through the cross, through a relationship with Jesus Christ. Nothing about me, but everything I did was for my family and for my team. And when you can start to get out of the way, just like we talk about in our faith all the time, when we start teaching that again as coaches to athletes, well, what Kevin and I have seen is all of a sudden when those boys realize we got a whole program over there full of kids that are looking at you, and we're starting to win, and it's not about you, and all of a sudden when hope gets into an equation.
Yeah, that's powerful, right? I mean, that's what you hope, is that they get it. It starts to click, right? And so it's a good segue, because one of the questions that I wanted to go, and then I'm going to give some time for you guys to ask your own questions as well. But the question is, youth sports is secular, right, as a whole. But we have unique opportunities in certain organizations to maybe to lead with faith. But SBMSA, you can make a case for, is not faith-based, right? And how do we as men, Christian men, who are often wanting to be coaches, how do we incorporate our faith as Christian men into coaching or even parenting our kids who are going through this?
I'll touch on that. At Spring Spirit, it's what we do. We're a Christian organization, so it's almost expected. It's welcomed. We pray after. Usually we pray before any meeting we have, or at the end of practice, we one of the kids gets up and prays us out. So whenever we break a practice, we pray. Unfortunately, last year, like Coach Mealy, Coach Mealy, the head coach at Northbrook, we have a good relationship with him, and he's not allowed to pray. It's frowned upon, right? And he wanted to, but it's frowned upon. So we walked on the field and we did it with him. There's ways around it. But I think that it's tough, because if you're at SBMSA or West U or wherever, unfortunately, some people might not like that. If if it's a seasonal thing and you're coaching their kids, and you're going to have some people that don't like that. So that's always a tough situation. I haven't had too many experiences with you hear stuff all the time, but maybe some of you guys have had experiences where people have expressed their dislike with that. So I think it's a tough situation, but I think if it comes from the heart and it's genuine, I think that it should come across the wrong way, and if it doesn't, then that's on them.
Yeah, I've coached 9 million teams and kids over the last 30 years, and I'm not a coach without it. It's the first thing, it's who I am. So, and I just make that clear, and everyone's welcome in my huddle. Everyone is. They don't have to pray, but it's how I'm going to do things, and it's how I have to do things, because I'm a broken man. I've got to let the Holy Spirit lead. I have no choice. And I've never had a complaint. Just be a good enough coach that they don't complain.
No pressure.
We coach 6U lacrosse, and started at 4U, and then we're up doing 6U now. my partners and I. And one thing we always stress, and we are an SBMSA organization, so a secular organization. But it just so happens that lacrosse was invented by the Native Americans. And the Iroquois word for lacrosse is the creator's game. And so the Native Americans would play lacrosse for two reasons mostly. One was to honor the creator. And so what we always talk about is, the way you play between the lines. So for example, lacrosse is interesting in that substitutions happen in real time. So you need to run as fast or faster off the field than you run on the field, because if you don't, a lot of bad things happen. You can't get your substitutions in, etc. So we always link the way you play between the lines and honoring the creator, or as the Native Americans said, the Great Spirit. The second thing that Native Americans played lacrosse for was to settle differences. So they figured out quickly that if two tribes go at each other with tomahawks, the young men die, which isn't good for anybody. And so they would use lacrosse to settle their differences. And so, we talk about, and in our faith, right, our faith is love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbors yourself. And so what we always try and keep in mind, and what we try as directly but indirectly as possible, is always remind our players of why we're out there. The number one thing we're out there to do is honor him and honor each other in what we do. So that's how we do it in our business.
Yeah, that's great. Are there any questions do you guys have that you might want to throw out to the panel? If you do,
Troy, I want to get started. So I want to take the opposite tact of kind of what a lot of the discussion has been about, of being a hard-charging parent and driving your kids to do this, do that. So from an opposite perspective, how do you, without burning out your kid, get your kid to honor their commitment and understand all the benefits of team sports or individual sports without seeming like you're driving them into the ground?
I think for me it was, all my kids, they love playing sports. And when I was growing up, I played sports, and it was going to be a matter of which one was I going to quit, because we can't get to all of them, right? And I was dragged everywhere because of tennis. I had no choice. But tennis, I ended up quitting, coincidentally. But
It's unfortunate because you have a great forehand.
thanks, man. Appreciate that. It was terrible when I played. Now that I'm done, it's better. But that's pickleball. But I think that my kids did year-round stuff. They played basketball, they played baseball. So when I was coaching baseball, it's like, okay, well, it's considered year-round, but my philosophy on year-round is going to be a lot different, right? There's going to be a lot less throwing. We're going to be looking after, we're watching arms. We're taking care of everybody. We knew the kids that were playing other sports, and we encouraged kids to play other sports. My two boys, when they went to Episcopal, they played volleyball. Who'd have ever thought they'd have played volleyball? And it was the most fun they ever had doing it, and kind of helped build. They were tall. They had no idea what they were doing, and we recruited some other kids that didn't play volleyball, but it was a great time. It was some of the best times they had. So I think it's. But when I was little, it was seasonal. We'd play basketball, then we'd play baseball, and then in certain months you didn't do anything. And so my approach was, okay, if my kids want to do this, I'm going to try to find the most, what's the proper term? The best way to do it without overextending them, right? And it wasn't going to be, they got to handle their academics. I think that's one important thing. I meant to make a point before about, the advice to parents is like, hey, your kid is 9. Like, he doesn't know what he wants to do tomorrow. He doesn't know what he wants to eat for breakfast. But instead of sending them to speed and agility and hitting, like, how about how's he doing in reading? How's his reading level? His reading level's not good. Look, here it is. put them in some reading classes, and that's what we do, and so that's the whole child piece. But I think that it's finding the right balance of if your kid does want to play multiple sports. It's tough to do, especially in today's deal, because every coach of that sport tries to make you feel guilty for missing stuff. But I think it's tough, but you got to find that right fit of coaches that understand and have the best interest of the kids and their development over time at heart.
One thing I did, I can't remember yesterday, so it was 3 or 4 years ago. I felt that same thing. Kids showing up to practice, dad standing there, and it was just flat. I mean, no matter what individual drill I did, no matter how good I was bringing it to this team, and it was a peewee kids, what I did was I said, everybody take your shoes off. And people, of course, start looking at me like I'm crazy, but you know me, you know I am half crazy. Take your shoes off, drop your gloves. Dads do the same thing. And then they're really thinking I said, let's go over here to this field. I grabbed a tennis ball and a bat. I said, the rest of this practice, no gloves, dads against kids, let's play some old school baseball. In that 1 hour, I watched kids not only fall in love with the game, I watched sons and dads laughing with each other, tackling, joking, men joking that have been standing next to each other that for 6 weeks they didn't even know each other's names. So, and I do that a lot. I've done that with a lot of my teams. I do it now. I mean, my biggest thing to tell kids is wiffle ball bat, no shoes, no gloves, go play. It is. And some of that gets back, it all comes back to the heart. It all comes back to love. It all comes back to the stuff Jesus talked about. Hope. All those things can come out of all these sports if that's what you're teaching. Teaching that sport itself is, 20, 30% of it, in my opinion. The other 70 is building a human being the way that he did it, the big H and the big E.
Yeah, I think that's good. And I think the other thing that kids like that we've discovered is they like accountability in a good way. So what do I mean by that? So starting, we were coaching 3rd and 4th graders, and what generally would happen is, especially in the 3rd grade, the boys would wander up, and their parents would help them put their pads on, and where's your mouthpiece, and number one, that took a lot of time, but number two, they just would stand there, and it was probably because they were way overscheduled and they'd been in their 50th hour or whatever, right? But what we started doing was we realized, you know what we need to do? We need to create a barrier between the parents and the kids, for the kids. And so what we started doing was we called one side of the field Playerville and the other side non-Playerville. And we told the kids, when you arrive at practice, you go to Playerville, and your parents aren't allowed to cross. The field's like lava, so they cannot cross over the field into Playerville. That's where you get dressed. And your time in Playerville is your time. So coaches, we're not allowed in Playerville either, right? Now, what we do control is time. So we said, you go over there and you get dressed yourselves. And the parents were like, Johnny can't dress himself. He can't put those pads on. And I mean, you've got a 9-year-old who, believe it or not, if you challenge them, they can put their own pads on. And then we started telling them, hey, listen, your parents are an Uber. So if you don't show up to practice on time, it's not your parents' fault, it's your fault. And you'll run or you'll do some push-ups or whatever. But more importantly, we expect you to keep track of when your practice is, right? And so, and we didn't punish them or anything, but lo and behold, when we gave them that responsibility, they started showing up to practice on time, right? We could beat the parents all day long and they'd still show up late, but we told the kids, use your parents as Ubers, right? And now, we almost overnight had kids showing up on time. And so I think that, to answer your question, Stick, I think, because it's a really good one, I think the more you can make, the more responsibility you can inject into a kid, a boy or girl, and where you're saying, I'm depending on you and you're depending on me, I think they are hungry. I think kids are hungry for that responsibility. I think they are. And so we've found that, and it just so happens also, tangentially, that the parents love it too. Because they can't believe it. They can't believe, they're like, we can't get them out of bed, and they want to show up to you guys for practice on time, right? And it's a pact, right? And I think to your question is, how do you get kids to love, because what I heard is really love a sport more, right? Be self-motivated to go, right? I don't want to drag my kid I don't want to make you go to practice, right? I want you to want to go to practice. And I think, weirdly enough, the more responsibility you can trust a kid with, the more they take ownership.
They're empowered.
Yeah, they're empowered. That's right. Thank you. Empowered. The more you empower them, the more they take ownership and the more they start to buy in and those sorts of things. That's what
So to answer your question about preventing burnout, the first thing that needs to happen is that everyone involved in that sport needs to buy into the preset structure of that sport. If whatever the coach puts out, if we're going to practice 2 or 3 days a week, I'm going to buy into that preset structure first. The issue we see with the burnout is when someone goes outside of the preset structure that the kid has already agreed upon. I'm going to go 2 to 3 times a week because that's what coaches said. Now, people try to speed up the process of, I want this blue chip kid by, you're really good at hitting. Imagine how good he would be if I would take him down the street to the batting cage for an extra hour. Now that kid doesn't want to do that because it becomes a chore. I didn't sign up for that preset schedule. So we can prevent it from happening if we agree on that preset schedule. And once that is done, if a kid wants more, getting that kid to understand their own body when they're tired or when they don't want to do something, and respecting that when they say, I'm tired, I'm sore. All I want, those 2 days is enough then. But if they're coming to you and say, man, Johnny, he goes to so-and-so and that's how he's getting better. I want to do that. Then we'll add that hour. That's what we have to respect. So respect the preset schedule first before you add on to prevent that burnout. Because I see it in track all the time. Once a parent figures out they have a Ferrari, everybody wants to take the Ferrari out all the time. Oh my gosh, he's so good, or he's so good. Yeah, they're winning first all the time. I want to put them in this meet, and this indoor meet, and then this outdoor meet, and then this Grand Prix. When I have to say, no, they got plenty of time. They're 9, okay? They're okay. They're not getting any scholarships at any finish line. So we have to be respectful of their body and understand what's going on. And sometimes you got to make that decision as a parent and save the child.
Profound statement.
Any other questions?
I got an observation and a question. I got 3 kids, and they all played basketball. They all got my height, but thank God they didn't get my talent because I was no good, and they were better. And they played 2 leagues. They played Tallowood Kingdom Ball, and they played SBMSA. And one of the observations I made just with all 3 of them throughout the years is how much joy they had in the Kingdom Ball, because the intensity wasn't there, the screaming parents weren't there, and sometimes the kids would coach themselves and comes up with plays better than the coach that was assigned for that week.
and to see the joy of the game and them enjoying that. And my question, and this is maybe more for comedy, but is what is the most challenging, unruly parent situation that you faced, and how did you successfully handle that?
You know, so back in the day when Marucci took over Baseball USA, I was the first guy they hired to be director of player development, all of it, right? Baseball operations. I came up with a guy, one of the founders of Marucci, so he had called me, knew I had a bunch of kids, and anyways, I did that for about 4 or 5 years, but I had to have a lot of difficult conversations with, because we had multiple teams, some at different age groups. We had an A team and a B team, and I don't know everything, but I got a pretty good idea, a pretty good scope of you know, a player's ability and talent. And so I had some very difficult conversations with families that I was pretty close with, and unfortunately, those relationships ended because of that. Because I said, "Hey, look, you know, your son is you know, he's never going to see the infield. He's not going to pitch. You know, he's going to bat at the bottom of the order. He's going to play a little bit of right field on this team, or he can be top of the order on this team, get to play second, a little bit of outfield, you know, maybe even some short and pitch." And again, we're talking about 12 years old, to where it's going to prepare him more for high school. Some of those conversations went south in a hurry. They didn't like it. And a majority of those are people that are still friends of mine to this day, and they appreciate kind of that honesty, right? But there's been a ton of situations that obviously I think with you know, the faith component's got to come in. You got one guy on your shoulder over here telling you the you know, how to respond correctly, and the guy over here that's telling you, you know, other ways to respond. But I think it's just every situation's different, and it's tough because, you know, sometimes just being brutally honest about certain situations is tough for people to hear, and I think we've all probably been in that situation at some point in our life, whether it's ourselves or our kids or whatever. So
I think what makes a huge difference, and the plug I'll put in here, is if you can coach and your kid isn't on the team. So I've done both, and it is remarkable the difference in the way a parent looks at what you say when your child is not on the team. And I also think you are, every person, male, female, everybody is a better coach when they're not coaching their kid. I've done it both ways, and it's night and day difference. So yeah, I've had parents come up to me, and the other thing is, what I will say is, I find myself being able to be more honest and more authentic when my kid isn't there. So I can say to a parent when they come up to me, right, and I can say, your kid is not going to play for Duke, right? Nor is, by the way, anybody out here, right? I can say that and not worry about saying it, not feel weird or strange about saying that. I can say that, and that parent will go, fair enough, right? But my delivery is possible because I don't have a kid on the team. I don't have a dog in the hunt, right? So.
Just to follow up on that a little bit, so I think certainly Stratford Memorial, parents can relate, but notwithstanding the coaching aspect, but just how do you model your behavior and or handle it when you have significantly more enthusiastic parents at games, especially when you're at rivalry games? Like I was at a junior varsity girls basketball game, not exactly prime time, and there was jawing back and forth between Memorial and Stratford parents, you know, pretty, not violent, but ugly. How, to the point where the girls, like, what's going on? And there's a lot of embarrassment and wives, you know, hitting their husbands and whatnot. how do you model as a parent your behavior to handle those types of situations?
I think that we're all guilty of it from time to time. We've been caught up in it in the moment, and I think that the coaching it's gotten away from the coaching, and I think that every organization I've been in, I've tried, I've had very strict parent rules, and I say, look, I don't cut the kids, I cut parents, and it's usually, I just had parent meeting last night for our whole organization, our 5 youth teams, and it's like, look, y'all are the ones that are going to cause, problems for your kids, or there's been times where it's like, this mom's crazy, da 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 da. It's like, well, the kids are sweet kids. I don't, they wanted to kick, family out. But, I'm like, these kids are sweet kids. I'm not, these kids are in the program, right? I can handle that. So I think, we've always been very blessed at Episcopal. We have a very good foundation with our coaches, and they kind of. I understand the Memorial and the Stratford. It's tough, and it gets heated. It gets crazy. But I think that even at young ages, we try to instill as coaches. You try to lay rules down. But if you're coaching seasonal, it's tough. Who are you to tell me I can't holler at my kid or whatever? But when you're in an organization and once you get to high school, it's a tough job for the coaches, but you got to instill that to where it's like, look, that nonsense, it's not going to fly. I don't care who you are and how much money you got or whatever. It's just not going to fly, and I don't want to hear from you. I want to hear from your kid. If he can't make practice and he's sick, I want to hear from the kid, not you. And so I think you establish kind of those lines of communication and expectations. But again, every situation is tough because, but I've had to shush parents before, when I was doing the Marucci thing, because I'm very big on kind of the reputation that we put forth and how we represent ourselves, our God family team. And I'm guilty of it. I got emotional from time to time in my kids' sports. I got thrown out of a Spring Forest basketball game. I had to go anyways, but yeah. I just got up
with a
right. I
bang.
was like, I got to go anyways. I had to go coach an SBMSA game. Yeah. But I just think that it's tough these days to try and really, put that hammer down when you're up against tough situations. But I'm fortunate enough to where it's our organization. And everywhere I've coached, it's hey, look, this is the way it's going to be. And if you don't like it, you can leave. I'll get somebody else that wants to take your spot.
I think the bigger question, too, is it's a global question, right? It's not just in youth sports. I mean, it's not. It's a brokenness in our culture. It's a lack of faith within our systems, our family systems, our everything. So it's going to take courageous men and women, just like they've done throughout history since they hung them on the cross, to do things different. And like I brought up earlier, the only reason why I brought up about Stratford, I got 4 kids that are on the Stratford team that play on the summer league team with me with our Northbrook boys. So it wasn't who was beating who. I wasn't bringing that up as Northbrook beating Stratford or either other. But at the end of the day, they're going to struggle. Any system's going to struggle if they don't have a true reason on why they're there. And I mean, they've got to. If God, or if it can't be God and it's secular, that's fine. What structures do we have within there, or rules that everyone can agree on? I mean, we've got to get more back to that. And in youth sports, it's just got to be more about the kids. I mean, that's the bottom line, and that's priorities. Not about who you feel like your whole identity is based on where your kid hits in the lineup. That's just broken. That's something that's where we have to do our work as leaders of our homes, as leaders in our community, all those different things. I think what happens in youth sports is a lot of that stuff just comes out sideways.
Yeah, that's great. So, any final thoughts? We're about time, but I'd love to make sure I give opportunity. If there's something that we haven't covered, there's something that's on your heart that you'd like to cover, that you get to do that.
One thing that I'd like, just as the final thing I'd like to say is, I think one of the best things, in the Bible, and especially the New Testament, fear is a constant. Fear and anxiety is something that is constantly an enemy that Jesus talks about, and the Bible talks about, and our faith talks about. And I think one of the best thing that youth sports does is it teaches kids, if coached properly, it teaches kids to deal with fear and anxiety from trying out, from, in lacrosse or football, turning the corner and you got a linebacker or a defenseman sitting down there. And how do I deal with fear and anxiety? And in today's society, with the kids in high school and college that are dealing with fear and anxiety, I think one of the great gifts that sports can hit head on is how do we deal and put ourselves in
And overcome.
And overcome.
I think that's a very good point. But to piggyback off of that, like the kids at Spring Spirit, most of them are needs-based kids, and we're providing a structured environment. They have had little to no structure, maybe ever, and a safe place of mentors and coaches and volunteers and everybody that is wanting to help them. And I think that I think sports does provide a lot of life lessons, like you said, the ups and downs, how to handle it. But I think that one thing I will say, and I almost seem to have conversations daily, and Brian, you can probably attest, or Brandon, sorry, can attest to this, is educating the parents on the recruiting process once they get to high school, and it starts. Maybe even in 8th grade of, okay, where are you choosing to go to high school? Some people don't really have options, but if you do, educating yourself on those options, and then once you do get into high school, being realistic about what's an opportunity, what opportunities do you have, right? It's incredibly tough to have the opportunity to play any sport in college. And our thing is just preparing kids for high school baseball, or whatever the sport may be, is if they want to play for their high school, we're going to provide every resource we can to do that. And if you're good enough, then we're going to help you go beyond that. But I think, specifically with baseball, it's educating the parents on that process, because nowadays, the perfect games of the world and everybody, they make you feel extremely guilty if you're missing out on stuff, and it costs a lot of money that a lot of people don't have, and it's just not necessary. And so, and I'm from the industry, I played it professionally and been coaching it for a long time, and it's still, it's still tough. So, trying to, regardless of what sport, is being educated and navigate through that process. That's a whole nother conversation, really. Once you get into high school, it's sad, how much parents are taken advantage of, and kids. I think you made the point of that Ferrari. Everybody, hey, what are you doing this weekend? You want to come play? So the parents think they're missing out, and they want to take. You don't need to go and do everything. You're going to get invited to everything under the moon. Some of it will be free, some of it's going to cost a lot of money, and you just don't need to do it. Just enjoy where you're at and what you're doing, and if you're good enough, you're good enough. There's scouts for a reason. They're coaches for a reason. They will find you. But just educating yourself and doing the research, regardless of what age you're at. Like, who is this I'm playing for? Who am I even thinking about playing for? Or and again, I think it gets back to just educating yourself on just everything. It comes back to the whole child piece of just making sure that you understand every kid's background. Everybody's different. You know, every organization you look to go and try out for, everybody's different. You know, what's the background? And so it's finding that fit that's going to be a situation to where you know that when you do drop your kid off, that they're in good hands.
Yeah.
And that's always been really important for us, because you can't be everywhere. You know, I want to be involved in my kid's life no matter what it is, but you know, whatever they want to pursue, it's putting them in that situation to where they're in good hands.
Right.
I don't have to worry about it.
Great.
I want to say this real quick. I know you're going to close us out after that. I just wanted to say it before that, on the recruitment deal, 2 things. Ask your coaches on the high school level. Ask the coach as a parent, because I know parents are going to be watching this. Ask the coach where they feel that the kid should be division-wise. If you're really interested in what's going on, like, does my child can make it to this level? Are there a D1 kid or D? Coaches usually have enough experience, even if they haven't played at that level. They have enough experience where they've seen enough kids who've made it to that level and can give you an honest, accurate opinion of where that kid should be and realistic route where they can, because some parents think that it's D1 or bust.
Yep.
They don't even understand Division I or Division II or D3 or NAIA or whatever you want to talk about. Ask them honestly, hey, is this what it is? Is my kid here? That way you can kind of set some goals the way he said. You know, I think that's very powerful. And what you were saying about that with the recruitment process is a lot. There's a lot goes into that.
It's overwhelming.
It's overwhelming. It takes me 40 hours per kid to get them recruited.
Wow.
Every year, per kid, 40 hours of work trying to get them recruited. It's a huge process. And as he was saying before about parents can get you off a recruitment list. Going to a game and watching a parent go nuts will get you off a recruitment list. Going on a recruitment trip, just really quick things. I had a kid go on a recruitment trip last year with a friend parent, and that person showed out, to say the least thing. And that coach called all the other coaches in that conference and said, you don't want this kid because this parent comes along with that kid. And it took 24 hours for that to happen to get all the way back to me in Houston that happened. So the way you can, hold yourself up as a parent is, it does affect them. So really think about that stuff. And only 2% of kids that are playing sports in high school go on to play on a collegiate level. 2%. That is a very special group. Regardless of what level, it's only 2%.
So what do we do with the other 98%, right?
There you go.
That's right. Mike?
So if it's all right, this is kind of a prayer.
Yeah, so let's close it out. Before we do that, we'll let you close it out. But just first off, just thanks for everybody, for those who are going to be watching this as well. Thank you to the panel. Thank you for all that you've done, your experience. This is our first shot at what we call the locker room, just men getting together to have a conversation about topics that matter and that they're passionate about. So good. We'll
All right.
read that and pray us out.
I sent yesterday, I think, to her.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
This week?
Yeah, this week, whatever. He's old. I can't remember. When I asked the boys if they were praying before their games, and they said no, I brought that up earlier. So my text to them was, if we have taught you anything, it is that the secret to our success is we bring our Father, the Holy Spirit, with us when we step inside the white lines, our God, family, and team. Our prayer before games and practice is the beginning of that process. Y'all don't need Coach or I there to do that. God, family, team, that's who we are and how we play. We don't need to talk smack. Our bats and gloves do that. It all starts with that prayer. Someone step up and lead. Who do we play for? If Coach Witt and I are not there in person, we are there in spirit, just like the Holy Spirit. All the glory of our success goes to our God, family, and team. Nothing about you individually in that, nothing about your coaches in that. It's all about the body of Christ, which is who we are when we are one as a team. In that dugout and on that field and in your life, every game and every practice, every class you attend, the words that come out of your mouth, you're representing the God family team, our God family team. God has chosen you to lead Spring Spirit and all the young ones watching you. Accept that responsibility and take it seriously. Most of all, know that we love you. You are our godsons. We always have your back. Go win. Give it all you got. Leave it all on the field. Take the risk and go all in. In life and on the field, this whole city will take notice this season. And hopefully all they see is your God, family, and your team. We are so proud of each one of you individually and as a team. We are the luckiest coaches alive, and we get to coach you and walk this journey they call life with each of you. Hit with your hearts, boys. Godspeed, Coach.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.